This is Facing the Nation, and I'm Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for inviting us into your homes again for another very informative week. What promises to be an informative week. This week, a Partnership for National Unity believes that the PPPC government has gotten involved in misspending the state funds in terms of preparing for an election, whether it be local government or general election. And the partnership believes that the PPPC is actually squandering and wasting money. On the panel with me, of course, this team is not only experienced in their various sectors, but they've also done a lot of work and continue to do a lot of work regarding APNU's preparation for whatever election comes. Of course, we have continued to call for the immediate holding of local government elections. I first off introduce you to, and of course welcome, APNU Member of Parliament, Ms. Amna Ali. As you would know, Ms. Ali is also APNU, the opposition chief whip in the National Assembly. She's the Shadow Minister of Education. She's Assistant General Secretary for the People's National Congress Reform. And of course, she is also the Chief Scrutineer. Welcome to you, Ms. Ali.
Thank you, Malika.
All right. She holds so many hats. She wears so many hats, actually, that I almost forgot one. But I won't do that to her today. And of course, no stranger to you, former Police Commissioner, APNU Member of Parliament, and Shadow Minister of Home Affairs. He is also here today in his capacity as the campaign director, or some of you may say campaign manager, for Partnership for National Unity. Welcome, Mr. Winston Felix.
Thank you very much, Malika.
Great to have you. And of course, leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the opposition, Brigadier the Honorable David Granger. Glad to have you as usual, sir.
Thanks, Mike. It's good to be back.
All right, great. Now, as I said today, APNU is concerned with the spendings. And just to give you a little breakdown, we've seen sudden and extra spending in the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sports, of course, by Dr. Frank Anthony. Then there's the Minister of Local Government, who has been doing a lot and saying a lot in terms of getting involved in projects that he should not be getting involved in, projects that the mayor and city council should actually be manning and controlling. Of course, you'll hear much more about that from the panel. Then there's the Minister of Amerindian Affairs, Ms. Pauline Sukai, who, well, it's a norm for her in terms of going to various hinterland communities and trying to bribe and buy our Amerindian brothers and sisters, or I should say our indigenous peoples. Then there's the Minister of Education in terms of extending schools and promising this and promising that. You'll hear how the partnership feels about that $10,000 grant per month. The Ministry of Finance, you'll hear about one Egel's recent escapades, and also you'll hear what the Prime Minister has been doing, saying that just to highlight the fact that APNU believes that all these sudden projects and sudden works by these various ministries and ministers are only what they're calling political gimmicks, and it's another way of wasting state funds and wasting taxpayers' monies. Before we get into today's discussion, now, as you know, APNU continues to hold various outreaches and public meetings just to inform and keep Guyanese up to date on what the partnership is doing in terms of preparing for local government elections that we continue to call for. And recently, the Youths for David Granger camp held a public meeting in Georgetown, and one of the speakers were Ms. Shondell Hope. She's a Region 4 councillor, and the presentation was a very good one. She touched on several issues, including issues that we're discussing here today, so we thought it appropriate to show you that clip. So take a look at this and we'll come back and talk some more with you. One of the members of the Youths for David Granger camp there at a recent public meeting held in Georgetown. It was actually held at the Turning Point community that's in the Tugville area there. Of course, she raised a number of issues that will also come up in today's discussion. Last week, we talked about several projects that we felt monies were wasted on because those projects were not executed properly. And this week, we're talking about wastage again, but this time, of course, the PPP using state funds for campaigning purposes. And at this time, I'll hand you over to the Brigadier.
Thank you very much, Malika. Well, it is clear, even to the blind, that elections are in the air. And the PPP has put the election machine into top gear. But the point is, it's a top gear at the state expense because they're using state funds as if it was their money. And several projects have been deliberately delayed over the period of the year, sometimes in case of two or more years. And now that elections are approaching, they're spending money, doing things which they should have done months or years ago. And what we see happening is that several ministers are clearly in the vanguard of this spending spree. We've got Minister Frank Anthony, who is now choosing to repair the City Hall. They've waited years, knowing the City Hall, 125 years old, one of the most prominent wooden buildings in the entire city. They've waited years and allowed the building to deteriorate. Now they're going to spend $200 million, hoping that people will thank the PPP for rescuing the City Hall building. So that is the mentality of the PPP. Instead of putting their money in normal administration and ensuring that the money is well spent, they wait until the damage is so severe that they have to spend more than they would have needed to spend in the first place. So that is what Dr. Frank Anthony is doing. And if you look at the other areas too, we see that Mr. Samuel Hines, the Prime Minister, has been sent to Berbice. They moved him from Upper Demerara, Berbice region, Region 10, and they transferred him to Region 6. Well, they probably feel he'll have more luck there. But here again, he's spending. People have been complaining about the roads, about the lights. Up to quite recently, we had, early this year, we had 3 children killed on a dark public road. Recently, we had another girl killed at Letterkenny. Now that the elections are approaching, they're hustling to spend money to impress the population that they care. And Mr. Whitaker too, he's spending money in Georgetown. Instead of waiting till the gutters and the canals get silted up, you know, instead of keeping the canals clear so the city wouldn't flood, they want to make a big splash so everybody will say what a good job the PPP is doing. And so it goes. Hispanic Chan with the grant for the schools, for parents to get their children to school. I think Commander Amna Ali, the Shadow Minister for Education, will tell you more about that. And we have Mr. Edgehill up at Linden. You know, suddenly they're discovering all of these projects need to be funded. But it is clear that the PPP is in election mode. They have deliberately delayed all this expenditure so that the impact in people's memories, in people's minds, would be that, the PPP is the party that is doing most for local governments, doing most for the population. But the rushed, the hasty expenditure that we're now seeing is going to end up costing the government and costing the people dearly. Because instead of getting money to support the NDCs, to support the town councils, and to enable them to administer the communities better, we're now waiting until damage has been done, and now we're trying to repair the damage. So the PPP is up to no good. The PPP is an election campaign, and we can expect that there's going to be more wasteful expenditure because it's not their money, it's our money. But they've deprived our councils, they've deprived our neighborhoods of this money for years, and now they hope to make a big splash.
Brigadier, do you believe that this sort of, well, I'm going to call it playing catch-up, apart from spending, wasting taxpayers' dollars, this method of the PPP now playing catch-up to institute these projects that you yourself said that that should have been executed a long time ago or as we go on. Do you believe that playing catch-up now will have any sort of positive effect on society?
Well, when you look at the PPP strategy, the election strategy, people have become quite fed up, you know. People know what's going on. I mean, like in indigenous communities, everybody knows that there is something called a school uniform program. But, you know, the Minister, Pauline Sukai, would make a big splash. It is not really having an impact. People are no longer impressed. I was present at a certain location in which she was donating inferior quality outboard engines. And people know the outboard engines are inferior. But she still goes on doing it, so it's not really going to have the impact that they expect. I don't know if they're doing it out of habit or if they're doing it out of some strange belief that people will be impressed. But over and over again, instead of using normal administrative means, for example, a little thing like a grass cutter, why should a minister have to leave his office to present a grass cutter. You know, next thing be presenting files and cutlasses.
Yeah.
But they feel this is part of the PPP playbook. They feel that, you know, they must take this photograph with grateful citizens accepting these little gifts from the minister and thanking the PPP for being so generous. It's our money. And we want to see our communities, our councils being run in a normal manner. And now that the elections are coming, we're seeing all of this expenditure. But this is not the way to run the country, and this is not what the people expect. No, I don't think it's going to have the impact that the PPP thinks.
Okay, all right. Chief Whip Ali, as I come to you now, what would, and specifically, of course, to the education sector for now, what would an APNU administration or Amna Ali as Minister of Education of Guyana do different in terms of the uniform vouchers for students? And of course, I know you've had an issue with the $10,000 grant that it took a very long time for the families and the students to actually get. What would you do different?
All right, I'll come to, thank you, Malika. I'll come to what I will do different, or what APNU will do different. But I want to say, first of all, that one of the functions of government is to provide goods and services to the people of the entire country. And so it is evident now that what is happening, because we are in election mode, the government is trying to do everything at the same time, to fool the people, to hope that the people will believe that, well, yes, this is a good government, this government is providing the goods and services necessary, and so on. But for me, and I believe for APNU, the focus is jumbled up because all the concentration now is on what can they do to win the votes of these people. And so I have no doubt that the introduction of the $10,000 per child in the public schools, that was their objective. APNU has no difficulty. We welcome that $10,000, but we believe that it should have been disbursed in a timely manner, so that it will be beneficial to all the children. And we do not believe that it has been disbursed in a timely manner. This is a new school term, and it has not yet been disbursed. I'm told that it is now going to be sometime in October. But Malika, on the question of disbursing this $10,000, I wonder whether the government, the Minister of Education, did not do an analysis, did not do a study to know that, for example, the students, the pupils of the Pomeroon River, 1 week they have to pay $5,000 to get to charity to a secondary school. The pupils in West Coast Babies to go to Burbyside School or any school in New Amsterdam, $5,000. So in 2 weeks, this $10,000 will be finished. We believe, and if I were in that position, that we will invest this money to assist not only the parents, but assist the children. For example, I'll tell you this. Every year, for the National Grade 6 exam, between 14,000 to 17,000 pupils write that exam. Of course, some excel, but the majority of them, they do not do well, and so they are placed at regular secondary schools and so on. The government boasts about the few who excel. We congratulate them. We're happy for them. Many of them come though from the private schools. And we believe, and in that lot of the 14,000 to 17,000 pupils who write that exam, every year you have over 7,000 pupils dropping out, the dropout rate. And almost every time Common Leader speaks, he reminds us about that. Those are children falling on the wayside. And so I come back to the point, if I were the Minister of Education, or what APNU will do, we will invest differently. Because, for example, those very children in the Pomeroon, it would have been better to invest in river transport to bring those children to their secondary school location, rather than a 2 weeks, $10,000 for them to go into their weekly or monthly income.
If I could interject here, MP Ali, would it be possible, I don't know how fair this would be, if you have $10,000 or how much the APNU would decide to grant to students living in Georgetown, and then a larger amount for students who have to do, like you talked about, who have to travel by river or Berbice? Would that be practical?
The bottom line is that we must be able to provide facilities, resources, whether it is children from riverine areas or the coastal areas, to help them with regards to their in transportation and other services to go to school, so we don't have dropout and so on. Okay. And also in terms of doing things differently in investing. I'll give you I like to give examples with these things. Last week, APNU was on the East Coast doing a lot of outreach work and so on. Mm-hmm. And we were told by many head teachers and teachers on the East Coast, until now, grants to the schools have not been given. Now these grants have got to purchase things like materials and so on, to aid teachers in doing their lessons and so on for the children in the schools. Now, if up to now you can't get the grant, so you can't purchase, so you can't let the children benefit, something is wrong there. But the focus is you have a big write-up about the schools that are being renovated and the schools that are being built. What is the point building schools? And we believe in building schools and renovating schools. But what is the point in not providing the services, the facilities in order to aid the development in the various schools? So certainly I will do it differently if I were to be in that position.
All right. Well, I know if the public has anything to say about it, you will be the next Minister of Education. You have experienced several elections, even before 2011 general elections. And now we're in this election mode, preparing for whatever election we'll have. Is this the first time that the PPPC government seems to be using state funds to project or propel their own election campaign?
Certainly it's not the first time. They always do it. And they always believe that they are so bright that they can fool the Guyanese public. But I tell you what, Malika, we have been getting response because we as a partnership have been going out all across the country. And we've been getting responses. And that is one of the reasons why we're highlighting it here this afternoon. Mm-hmm. Many of the people, they understand why this is happening. But I don't know if the PPP believe, well, maybe they're ostriches. I don't, you know, because the people know that it is because it is election time. Oh, they're getting all the brush cutters. Why they didn't get it before? They getting electricity. There's less beholden. The homes get electricity, and now the street lighting and so on will be done. Or this one laptop per family. Only certain areas getting the one laptop per family. You know, or their strategies. Oh, let me go into some areas where they have lost control, where they believe that either the APNU or the AFC will gain momentum in those areas. And so that's why you see Sam Hines is going in Region 6 and doing these things. The East Bank Beach Road is another example. Why so many times money voted in the budget to do the East Bank Road? No care to do the East Bank Road. The original amount was budgeted for that road was $60 million. And suddenly, a large chunk, 26 million, was spent on Indian Arrival Day. And then you hear that 34 million is left. Well, I understand they say now 36 million will be spent on the East Beach Road. Mm-hmm. Those people there are not stupid. They know that because it is election time, that is a great promise with the hope that they are going to get the votes of the people of the East Beach. But I leave that for them to make an assessment. The people need their roads. The roads are bad. This afternoon, my colleague, Mr. Felix, is going on, to use as. I warned him that he should leave in good time because it is going to take him a very, very long time to traverse that road to reach where he is going.
Okay. All right. I think it's a perfect note to pull MP Felix into the conversation. MP Felix, Brigadier has said it. He has talked about the fact that the PPPC is misusing state funds to promote their own election campaign. While the PPP is doing that, what is a partnership for national unity doing, apart from various visits? What is a partnership for national unity doing to push their own campaign for local government elections, or in the event that we have a general elections before?
Thank you, Malika. We are sensitizing the public through various means.
Okay.
One means which comes on stream today is whistle-stop meetings throughout the country. We have such meetings in East Bank Bobis. We have them on the quarantine. We have in Kanji. We have on West Bobis and in Georgetown. To let people know the importance of local government to their lives, to their very existence in their communities, that their constituencies are to be empowered, the NDCs are to be empowered to do works in the area which they are better able to do. You know, you live in the house, you know where it is leaking. And as such, it is improper for government to take over, central government to take over works which the NDC should be doing. All these little cleaning of the burial ground, the city council that I know used to have that burial ground in great shape. You could have stood up in my time as a young man from St. Stephen Street and see straight through to the Cemetery Road. The burial ground wasn't like that. You could have driven from Broad Street. The funerals used to enter the burial ground from Broad Street. There's no bridge at the Broad Street entrance to the burial ground now. So my point is that the city council, as one example of local government, ought to be empowered to do the work for the citizens in Georgetown. And similarly, the NDCs in Linden, in Borbis, ought to be able to be empowered, one, through finance, to do the work that is required of them in those areas. Not for government to underfund them at one time, blame them for works that has not been done at another time, and then suddenly the government rushes in with sums of money, like Father Christmas, to do works which could have been done months ago. And that is where I see the government now is creating this dependency syndrome on these NDCs. Starve them and then give them handouts.
What are the residents in the various communities saying to APNU's campaign director about these projects that government have now undertaken, and are they going to support? Do you believe that they understand APNU's role and APNU's goal?
Well, from what APNU is doing, people are learning, and some people know exactly what is to be done. There are different levels of understanding out there. So that those who had little understanding, they are developing their understanding from our meetings and our interaction with them. And they come to us with problems. They are telling us, like in Sophia, that they are not getting water. They have poor roads. They are telling us these things. They are telling us about the absence of street lighting. These are things which the citizens know about. In New Amsterdam, people are telling us that they don't have roads in Angais Avenue. They're telling us about the plight about land distribution, etc. Well, these are things issues which the government has left to be degraded, and then suddenly you'll see government coming in. The people on the road on the east bank of Borbis, they have had public protests about that road.
Yes.
Public protests about that road. So now government is the good boy, and they will go in and do some sort of a road, because we know this government is good at doing a road today and it breaks up tomorrow. So we don't know what quality of road they will get. We know they will get some kind of road for elections.
Okay, all right. Viewers, if you're now joining us, you're tuned to Facing the Nation. Of course, today we're discussing what a Partnership for National Unity calls government misuse of state funds and taxpayers' dollars to promote their own election campaign. And of course, I'll try my very best to take a few of your calls a little later on, depending on how our discussion goes. Now, eventually, I want to pull Brigadier back in and talk about what really a Partnership for National Unity and of course, himself can do to kind of stop government from misspending our monies. But before I do that, MP Felix, this is to take it off topic a bit. I don't think I can have the former police commissioner on and not ask about what the current Home Affairs Minister would have said recently. Now, the Brigadier has started a series of, or he's been supporting a series of picketing exercises in order to remind government that we need to have local government elections almost immediately. Even though the Brigadier has already indicated that those picket exercises are peaceful picket exercises, it seems that Mr. Roy is already talking about if the picket exercises get out of hand, what will happen. Do you feel threatened? Should the Brigadier feel threatened by statements coming from Mr. Rohi?
Well, let me say this. First of all, I'm going to come to whether the Brigadier should feel threatened. As a matter of fact, we all feel threatened listening to the statements of Rohi. But I'll come to that. APNU, PNC have always been holding peaceful protests. From my previous job, I know who had been inserting troublemakers into, at that time, PNC Friday afternoon marches. I know that. I took action against that. So the PPP is not innocent in that regard. They are not innocent. Nevertheless, the Partnership for National Unity is committed to peaceful protests, whether it is picketing. And let me tell Rui something. You don't have to get permission to picket. You don't have to get permission to picket. And this nonsense what they do about telling you to stand over there and stand over there, You stand in front of the place where you want your message to be communicated.
That's right.
So let us understand this thing clearly. You come to picket, it is a message you are communicating, and you have to stand in front of the place where you want your message to be received. So, of recent, Roy is saying, Granger say weak. Well, he's troubled by Granger saying that he's weak. So he wants to show us that he's not weak. That is what he wants to do. So he's going to misuse state power, the police, to show us that he is not weak. But I would like to tell Mr. Rui something that is well known. Once he puts his hand on the police, it goes awfully wrong. Once he micromanages the police, it goes awfully wrong. So by saying that Granger say you're weak and he's going to show you're weak if the protests are not peaceful, coupled with the fact that of recent we're seeing some coordinated police roadblocks, East Coast, East Bank, Georgetown, East Coast, just on Sparendam, Georgetown at the back of the gardens, and East Bank by the bypass road, the Houston bypass. There are some well coordinated roadblocks in the evenings, in the night. So we understand what is happening, and at best it is intimidatory. Okay. At best, that action is intimidatory, and the brigadier has a right to feel threatened by all, because he represents people, and it is the people who are being threatened or intimidated by an overwhelming police presence. Because all they're doing, they're still having robberies. They're still having armed robberies around the place. The armed robberies have not abated. Actually, the criminals operate outside of these roadblocks. Well outside. If they didn't catch them in the early stages, they'll never catch them on the roadblocks, because they are predictable. Okay. And so our constituency being threatened, being intimidated, the brigadier has a right to feel threatened and intimidated.
Thank you very much, sir. Brigadier, as we bring the conversation back to where we began, of course, the misuse of state funds. Now, APN News is putting it out there, complaining, saying that, look, government continues to do this. Constitutionally and legally, is there anything that your partnership can do to stop government from wasting our monies?
Well, I do not believe there's anything in the Constitution. I know that in some jurisdictions, the government is prohibited from certain types of expenditure when elections approach. For example, I know in one country, I think in India, we had a situation in which a former prime minister was actually using the army helicopter to go on visits so close to elections, and it was determined that she was actually using the helicopter to do election campaigning. Now, that is a great law, but in Guyana, what we see happening is that we have like a minister of American Affairs going to hinterland communities, and sometimes other ministers will accompany her, but they're going campaigning. But we don't have such a law. I'm not aware of such a law. But you can tell from the level of expenditure, you can tell from the glamour that surrounds it, you can tell from the spectacle that is created, that these events are planned to have the maximum impact on those communities. As my colleague said earlier, if the minister of, why should a minister of the government have to hand out grass cutters? This is a normal, you go to the stores and uplift a grass cutter. This is a normal administrative activity. But we do not have specific laws, at least I'm not aware of any specific laws, which prohibit the use of state funds to embark on new activities which can be construed as vote-getting activities. So I think that is something we need to be careful of. It is something that we need to include in our laws in future, because we are worried that in one case, I remember when Bar Jagdeo was president, he carried a whole team of GINA reporters, and all of them had PPP T-shirts. So it convinced us, and this was only 2006, it convinced us that the government news agency was being used as an arm of the PPP. And of course, when you saw the news coverage, it was clear that it was PPP propaganda. So there should be a law. But let me add something else to what my colleague has said. That is, on previous occasions, and on this occasion, we find the government actually spending money instead of providing normal policing, which people depend on to combat piracy or banditry or domestic violence. We see money being spent deliberately on coercive equipment, like the water cannon. I mean, that's a scandal. Millions of dollars were spent and the water cannon could not be used. But it was meant to harm people. It was meant to counter popular demonstrations. And there's nothing unlawful about popular demonstrations. This time, we have shields. Who are they bringing the shields against? Their own people? Is it some Roman legion? Why did they start training in the use of shields for crowd dispersal at the same time that APNU started picketing? So these elections are creating a fever in the government service, and it's incurring expenditure which should not be encouraged normally. In the time of Mr. Jagdeo, people don't realize, Mr. Gadraj, I think, when he was Commissioner of Police, people don't realize that they brought some armored cars from India. But these things were like ovens. And I don't think that many people saw them on the streets, and they're now parked up. So to the extent that the government rushes into this type of expenditure close to elections, sometimes it results in wastage because it is spending too much too late. And I think I'll come back to what my colleague, Ms. Amna said, that with a little bit of forethought, the same money could have been better spent if it had been done in a timely manner. But because of the PPP mindset, to delay expenditure until election, we find shambles. If they had sat down with us, because they were supposed to be meeting between the shadow Minister of Education and the substantive Minister of Education, they are going to provide $1 billion. How best could this money be spent in order to get children to school? Ms. Ali would have been able to give the type of advice because she goes around the country. She knows what's happening in all of the regions. She would be able to say, well, look, the best thing to do to spend this money, or the best way to spend this money, is to provide boats or buses or some other means. This money is going to go away, and you go back next year, September, children will be in the same position as they are this year. So this money that is being spent is simply to create an impression for the sake of elections, and that is why APNU is opposed to the character of electioneering, that poorly thought out schemes are being invented simply to catch the eye of the public as elections approach.
Thank you very much, sir. Viewers, with only about 7 minutes left in our program, I'll take about 2 or 3 of your very brief calls. Please get to the point, turn the volumes of your television sets down, be as brief as you possibly can, and of course, be respectful. Caller, welcome to you.
Hi, good afternoon to you and the panel.
Yes.
The panel. I would like to touch on the panel government is misusing the fund, the taxpayers' fund.
Yeah.
Another thing I would like to mention, and I'll just get to the point, the court system.
Caller, you're going to have to repeat that second point for me. You're sounding a bit distorted.
Okay, I'd like to touch on another point. The point is that court system.
Court system, yes.
Nobody, the public at large, does not have any faith
Faith.
There's
Oh.
matters at the court where people have been attending for 2-3 years and cannot get justice.
Okay.
Magistrate last in her record book. You know, and these kind of things, and you've been attending court. It's very frustrating, and people are not putting any faith in the justice system anymore.
Okay.
That's why you have, so I believe that's one of the reasons you have so much increased crime.
Okay.
You know, people are taking matters into their own hands, and I think that, you know, people, you know, Mr. Granger and so on should look into these things.
Okay.
You know, mention about these things.
All right.
Where's the first
Thank you,
one?
caller.
Where's the first
The caller, viewers, of course, for the sake of the panel and the sake of the viewers, the first caller, the first question, the point the caller raised is basically supporting what APNU is saying, that, look, government is misusing funds and he's concerned because he's a taxpayer. He's paying tax dollars and it's being wasted. And secondly, he talked about the fact that he doesn't have any faith in the court system, and persons are going to court for years and still can't get justice. He wants the opposition leader to intervene. But before I get before I get responses, I'll take one final call. Caller, are you there? Caller?
Hello?
Yes, caller. You're on the air.
This is a child of the universe.
Yes, child of the universe. Please go ahead.
Why have not the $1,000 in uniform support be given to all the children, both in primary schools and public, both in public schools
and private
schools?
All right.
Isn't that money funded by taxpayers' contribution?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
It's an undesirable dichotomy between the private and the public schools.
Okay.
And I think that you can't penalize private school children because they're going to private schools.
Fair
I
enough.
would like greater political agitation. I have raised this subject on Action Line, and there were 15 persons on Action Line. Quarter of the persons addressed this subject, and they were so passionate.
Okay. All right, caller. I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you very much, and I'll take the final call. Caller, welcome.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air. Your final caller.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
I want Mr. Granger, good afternoon to the panel. I want Mr. Granger to know to raise the butler on the East Coast and what it is he's going to do about it. Because I work for 8,000 and every night I have to come home. I have to pay $60 extra. And if the PPP pay to chronicle that is a special, the bus fare raise, 180 to come to 180 to come to and Grove, 160 to come to Victoria. So what about me paying? When I go in the market, I don't get nothing with but rice, flour, and sugar.
All right, caller.
Understand?
Yeah.
Come, Mr. Granger, $8,000 if you can't mind me. I wanted to know that. But the other day I was in the supermarket, and the minister is right for shopping, and her bill was 95,000. And my bill with me 8,000 was only 5,000. Good afternoon.
Thank you, caller. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen on the panel, 3 brief calls, but a lot to take in.
Good. First thing is the court system. Well, for years the public has been suffering by this system. Cases cannot be quickly resolved. Why? There are a large number of cases, both criminal and civil, and there are too few magistrates and judges to decide these cases. One reason is the poor remuneration makes the profession not very attractive. The lawyers who would transition to magistrates and judges feel that they're better remunerated in private practice. And the job is not made easier because it is merely a handwritten system. The court reporters, as we should have them, the system had started, but it was obliterated a few years ago. So the magistrates and judges sit down and literally write every word the witnesses say. and then they have to come back and write their decisions. So the job is not very attractive, and you have few magistrates, few judges to decide on a large number of cases.
Okay, all right.
Yes, thank you, Malika. Malika, on the question of the $10,000 private schools, and first of all, let me say this. The children who go to private schools, they don't go there because they are rich, they got plenty money and that kind of thing. But the Guyanese nation, if everybody could have gone to a private school, they would have gone, because they have lost faith in the public school system. And I don't have to regurgitate, but we see it in the examination results. What is different in the private schools to that of the public schools? Hence, I would say that those children who go to the private schools should not be punished, but they too, I would advocate, should be recipients of this $10,000 grant by the Ministry of Education. So I quite agree with the caller, what he says, child of the universe. Yes, that that both the public school child and private school child should benefit from the $10,000. Very clear. It's not because money is flowing, people send their children to private schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Brigadier.
Well, as far as the, my interpretation is that there's a problem with the cost of living. And it is only APNU that has really been carrying the fight for poverty alleviation. And in fact, 2 out of every 5 Guyanese can be classified as poor. And that is unacceptable for a country like ours. There are sufficient resources, but because of government policies, we find that there has been no, I would say, implementation of the what is called the strategy, the poverty alleviation strategy, over the last 5 years or so. So a lot of people have complained to us about the cost of living. We have taken action to reduce the value-added tax. We've taken action to reduce the tolls on the Berbice River Bridge. And also, on the other hand, we've taken action to encourage the government to sit down with the trade unions to pay the workers better, particularly government servants, including the security forces. And this has not been happening. The government deliberately waits until Christmas time and just flings out a little pittance. And it is not enough to encourage public servants to save or even have a decent quality of life. So we sympathize with the caller. There needs to be a proper poverty strategy reduction paper implemented again, because the government is ignoring the existing poverty reduction strategy. We need to look at the whole employment and wages policy, and our economic spokesman is doing that, because we want to ensure that people are employed, and they're employed at living wages. As you know, there is a great influx of people from different countries, you know, Brazil, China, and other countries, India as well, who are occupying good positions, but we want to make sure that our own citizens are trained and educated to a sufficient level to enable them to take those positions, managerial and other positions in these companies. So there's much that can be done. We cannot deal with every individual case, but we do have a poverty reduction strategy in APNU. We want to see the value-added tax reduced. We want to see wages increased. We want to see people achieving a higher quality of living, because when they live better, when they have better education, better housing, better public services, they will be able to produce more. That is how the country is going to become rich. You can't make the country rich by making people poor. Okay. So it's quite, you know, the policies the government has been following for the last 22 years have impoverished a great number of Guyanese. I've never seen so many poor people in my life.
Okay.
And we need to reverse that strategy.
Thank you very much, sir. And viewers, I remind you that the only way that you can reverse that situation is, of course, by voting for a partnership for national unity when next we have elections, whatever elections it is that we'll be having. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank my panelists, of course, APNU Member of Parliament, Chief Whip, Shadow Minister of Education, Assistant General Secretary of People's National Congress Reform. She's laughing because I'm giving her all her hats. And of course, Chief Scrutineer, Ms. Amna Ali. And former Police Commissioner, APNU Member of Parliament, and APNU Shadow Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Winston Felix, who's also APNU's campaign director. And of course, leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the opposition, who only has 2 hats on this program, Brigadier the Honorable David Granger. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for tuning in. Tune in again next week. And of course, be good Guyanese citizens. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Goodbye.